Alright guys, welcome back to my channel, your favorite booktuber. Today, let's talk about this book called To Pixar and Beyond. It's actually written by Lawrence Levy. The subtitle is My Unlikely Journey with Steve Jobs and Make Entertainment History. If you are new to the channel, if you check out episode 1, we started the channel with Bob Iger's biography, right? The Ride of a Lifetime. And when I was first reading the book and doing the audio version of the podcast, I started to branch out to Pixar, and I think Pixar is one of my favorite modern companies, and the storyline is just amazing. So, as we talked about before, if you like to follow my daily book podcast, a little bit of technical difficulties. Feel free to listen to the podcast and subscribe to it and follow me on Goodreads. And you can check out what I'm currently reading. So, like I said, right? So ever since I read that book back in the summer in 2020, I started to go on this kind of a rabbit hole on Pixar. So let's start with Lawrence, right? Lawrence Levy. Who is he? So he went to Harvard Law School. He used to be I guess a lawyer working for a big law firm at Silicon Valley. And he was contacted by Steve Jobs, I think 94, 93, roughly that time period, to take Pixar public. And at that time, he was working at a very cushy job, right, in Silicon Valley. And then he was taking a risk, right? So he is the one that's solely responsible for taking Pixar public back in 1995. And within his tenure there, right, he obviously worked with Steve Jobs, and he dealt with Bob Iger, which is probably one of my favorite business icon right now. And Lawrence kind of went through it all. And then if you kind of think about this whole Pixar's origin story, I want to kind of do a series on this for the next couple of weeks for this channel. Is that his book really is like a business case study on every page, right? Kind of like he write about how his first impression of Pixar, and then kind of like how he evaluate his decisions, I think are actually very, very interesting in this case. So these are the starting 5 for Pixar. So obviously we have Jobs, right? The financial backer. We're gonna get into it a little bit more deeper towards the end of this podcast. And we have Ed Camel and then John Cassater. Those two are Pixar's creative leads. And we have Lawrence right here as a CFO. And this lady, I remember she was in charge of the software renderment, I think, or head of HR, but I don't remember. Sorry, lady. So this is Pixar's Crew from early 90s. So let's use this time. Let's talk about Pixar's origin. I think it's actually really interesting, right? So when we think about Pixar right now, we think about these characters, right? We have Cars, we have Toy Story. But in the beginning, the reason that Jobs bought Pixar as a company, he actually bought it as a hardware company. Not very many people know that. So the number one product for Jobs during that time was a Pixar imaging computer, as you can see in this photo. So Jobs is always a hardware product guy, right? You see it from the iPhone, the iPod, right, the iPad. So he was following his MO. He purchased Pixar to become a imaging computer company. So he was still doing the computer pass right there. But the thing is that they need to showcase the Pixar's computer's abilities, so they need to make animated film in order to showcase the imaging capacity for the computer, right? The reason that they want it to be animated is because that is the hardest way to make a film, and that will showcase the Pixar's software or hardware and the integration. So very early on for the beginning of the Pixar film, like the storytelling capacity of the company is mostly a byproduct. It's not the product, right? We all know that Pixar's number one product right now are the movies, are the IPs. But back then, it was a kind of a commercial or like an app product for the computer. So, moving on, right? In 1991, this is a very, very important date. I want you guys to keep that year in mind. On that year, Pixar's imaging computer failed. And they're too expensive. There's not enough market buyers, right? Like the only buyer that would need this are large movie studios, right? Even like a ad company or a ad producing company, they don't need it because they can most likely get the real action, get real people to play the commercial, and that will be cheaper than doing an animated film, right? So it's very interesting to note that in 1991, still at this point, Jobs never ever wanted a storytelling company. He never really wanted anything but a hardware company. He doesn't want a movie a studio. He just doesn't care about a storytelling at that time. And we're talking that's like the 1991 or his belief before purchasing Pixar as well. So he always sees the animated film as a feature, not the essence of the company. So moving on, his early partners were Ed Camels and John Cassater, right? So in a sense that in 1991, Pixar was operating at a loss. So this is the pre-sequel before Lawrence on the left come into the company. The company was in financial trouble, right? Like it could very well be bankrupt if Jobs never really step in to foot the bill. So here's what happened. After 1991, Pixar's financial troubles really are looming. So every single month, operating Pixar, they're just not going to pull in that much money to keep the boat running, right? Or keep the boat afloat. So what that means is every single month, you see the guy on Jobs' left, Ed, and then the guy on Jobs' right, John. They will figure out, okay, Pixar is losing this much money, and then they will go to Jobs by the end of the month to say, hey Jobs, hey Steve, we need this amount of money every single month. So in a sense that Jobs was actually bankrolling the company just by himself so that he can pay for all the artists and pay for all the creatives and pay for the company to keep the Pixar afloat. And then it's during that time, Jobs reached out to Lawrence, our friends here on the left, and wanted to take the company public. So if you don't know anything about IPO, when a company got public, there is going to be a windfall of cash getting infused into the business. So what that means is the Netflix will be at least self-sufficient for a little bit. So Jobs don't need to pitch in his own money months after months. Pardon me, it has been a few months since I read the book. I don't remember exactly how much money was Steve pitching in. I was remembering somewhere around maybe six figures every single month that he was putting into this company, right? So one logical person might ask why, right? Why would Jobs do that? Why would Jobs just let Pixar fail? Because if you really think about it, his heart is in the hardware business. But after the hardware business failed, he has no skin in the game. Like he literally have no reason to back up this silly little company named Pixar. So again, I am going to refer to the very, very important years of 1991. So right before that, Jobs was fired by Apple, right? We all know that it was a corporate takeover. The Apple board of directors removed Jobs and hired the Pepsi CEO, John Scully, which is a disaster, right? So during that time, while running Pixar, Jobs is also working on Next, right? The personal computer. But the thing is that was a failure as well. So Jobs was kind of in this rough patch, right? Where everything he touches, he failed at, right? Most people think, oh yeah, he's really a tech genius. During that time, he wasn't, right? During that time, that was probably the low light of his entire lifetime. So, in relation to Pixar, he's really trying to pitch in and trying to keep the company afloat because he cannot allow another failure on his resume in such a rapid section, right? Like he got fired by Apple, the next computer is not working well, and Pixar also fell too. That cannot happen, right? So Jobs was mostly being a stubborn, according to Lawrence, right? So in this very very critical time period, right? This is 1991. Lawrence are trying to. He basically gets thrown into this madness where trying to get a company IPO, take it to the public, and then in the meantime, none of the financials worked at Pixar, and then he was being put between a tech guy with his Jobs, and then all the creative people at Pixar feel like Lawrence was brought in by Jobs. He report only to Jobs, but the creative never really accepted Jobs as a person that gets them, that as a person that get the film industry. Because the creative at Pixar at that time were very good at what they're doing, but they just cannot make a profit off of animation during the early 1990s. So if you can see from this particular page, right, like Lawrence was in a very tough spot, right? And then he needs to navigate between the creative at Pixar and also with a very, very difficult boss called Steve Jobs. So I want to end today's episode on this page because I think that this is a really, really interesting case to see how Lawrence started to integrate different departments of Pixar. And I want to spend maybe next couple of days talk about different ways that Pixar made money in the early 90s, right? Like we are talking about a losing Pixar's like the Pixar was never making money, right, at anything in the early 1990s, and then he needs to figure out how to gel the creative with the difficult boss, right, at Jobs, and he needs to figure out, okay, what can I do to make sure that Pixar can start making money, right? What can I do to make sure that we can at least have some cash flow to show to the investment bank and I'm trying to book an IPO. So in a sense, this is a very, very heartwarming story or kind of like, a climbing out of the bottom business type of story to figure out, okay, that was Pixar's situation back in 1991. It was super bad. How can this guy, our hero of the of the podcast, right, Lawrence, how can he pull Pixar out of the mud, so to speak, right? So within the next couple weeks, I want to touch on these different ways that Pixar made money back then, right? The first is the RenderMan software, where it is a software for them to create animation. They still use it and they still license it to people. And secondly, is what they're doing is animated short films, which win them countless awards, right? Back in the late 70s and in the 80s. And then the relationship to Toy Story, right? Their first, or the world's first, animated short film. So I'm really hoping to take you guys through the medium of this video podcast down this rabbit hole with me in terms of, okay, how will Pixar survive this and how will Lawrence at least try to figure out how will they make money. I'm talking about Pixar and how can they get the company back on track and eventually take it to market, right? So thanks for watching and stay tuned. Subscribe to the channel, hit the bell, whatever. And we're going to do a Pixar deep dive within the next couple of weeks. Alrighty? Thank you guys. Have a nice day.